Chapter 21. Returning from the hills where he had led his own horses and Patch to a secure grazing place, Slocum found Kittering asleep in a chair by Helen's bunk. The girl looked up with shining eyes as her father entered quietly.
"Dad, he's exhausted. He was thrown from his horse in that stampede. That much of Wilding's story was true. But he was behind the herd, not in front of it, so he wasn't trampled. That must have been another cowboy. They ran into one other one, and the other one didn't fall, and he couldn't keep his horse. He was carried on. Jim says Patch would never have left him, but with the confusion and the dust, they lost each other. Jim walked nearly all night to get here. He stopped to rest up near the pass and saw Wilding and Plug go by leading his horse, so he came as fast as he could."
And a doggone good thing, too, he did, Slocum said. Somebody sure ought to kick me for letting myself be took that way.
He frowned down upon the sleeping man.
I'd like to put him to bed, but I'm scared to touch him. He'll probably pull a gun asleep. Should I wake him up?
But he had little cause for worry. Kittering was so exhausted he never stirred when the homesteader bent and lifted him like a child. Slocum carried him into the next room and put him into his own bunk, taking off the puncher's dusty boots and his heavy gun belt. Kittering was as lax as a dead man. For the next few hours, Slocum busied himself bringing in wood, which he stacked along the walls to serve as a double purpose, fuel, and breastworks. He made trip after trip to the creek for water to fill the barrel, which he had placed in a corner and barricaded with logs to protect it from bullets. He made sure that the heavy wooden shutters were secure, and finally he checked over the guns and ammunition. During all that time, Kittering slept, and Helen watched Slocum's coming and going with a troubled face. "Dad, are you so sure there's going to be trouble?"
Sure am, gal. It's Wilding or me now. Only one of us is coming out alive, and he knows it. Now listen, when they come, I'm going to take you out of your bunk and spread your bedclothes on the floor. You'll be safer there, and I'll build up some heavy logs around you for a barricade. Wish I could get you away from here altogether, but I don't know how to do it."
"I wouldn't go away anyway. Let me have a gun, Dad. I can shoot."
"No, that shoulder of yours is just healing now, and you don't want to be jarring it with a gun. We'll do all right without you."
With all the prepared tasks done, the intolerable tension of waiting descended. The attack might be launched today, tonight, or even tomorrow. There was no telling when it would come, but curiously enough, now that the maneuvering was over and a straight finish fight was in prospect, Slocum appeared more cheerful and less nervous. Now at least he knew what to expect and he wasn't afraid. He moved around the cabin with his lips puckered in a soundless whistle. His eyes was bright and his movements rapid and efficient. Helen admired him tremendously. Towards mid-afternoon, Doc Martin arrived, bringing in a load of supplies and some extra ammunition. He had seen no sign of Lazy Barrett's men, and when informed of the latest developments, showed the same response as Slocum. He was glad that the climax had finally arrived. His horse was taken up into the hills, and then together he and Slocum checked over their defenses for a last time. 2 hours later they came, openly, trotting down the narrow trail two abreast, heading without hurry straight towards the cabin. Slocum and the doctor, who were outside, came in and barred the door, and Doc Martin woke Kittering, while Slocum went to take Helen out of her bunk and put her in her improvised cradle. Kittering sat up and groped drowsily for his boots. "Did Harkness get back?" he asked. No, is he coming? He should have been here long ago. The doctor started to say something, but was interrupted by Helen, who called from the next room, and Kittering went inside. Jim, come here a second, said the girl. He knelt down beside her, smiling at the heavy log framework. This sure is a noble saddle you got here. Jim, be careful, will you? Please don't get yourself killed. I don't think I could bear it. He bent and then kissed her gently. Oh, don't be scared, he said, and smiled. I couldn't get killed now. I seem to have too much to live for. Out front, the first heavy shot echoed through the valley and reverberated back and forth between the hills. Kittering kissed her once more hastily, almost fiercely, then straightened, went back into the other room to find Slocum and Doc Martin kneeling, one at the window and the other at an improvised loophole through the door. He looked out cautiously through Slocum's window. How many's out there? 11 that I can make out, Slocum replied. That gulch is full of them, the darn old coyotes. There's Wilding, see him? I'll bet his head is still ringing. He's coming right along with a gun in his hand. I wonder, can he use his right arm yet? The lazy bar ex-punchers had tethered their horses far up the valley out of rifle shot and had left a man to guard them. The rest were advancing in a wide semicircle, keeping low and firing at the cabin to keep the defenders under cover as they came. The horns of their half circle were spreading out of the hills on each side. They'll be up on the hill and back of the cabin in no time, Kittering said. I reckon I better take to the back room. There was a tiny window above Helen's bunk which gave a view of the creek and part of the hillside through the spaces of the heavy shutters. Kittering perched on the edge of the bunk, spilled his loose cartridges out beside him. He smiled encouragingly at the girl, but didn't try to speak because the rifles out front were firing now with increasing rapidity and inside were beginning to reply. The smell of gun smoke began to drift through the cabin, and the thump of bullets sinking into wood jarred nastily on their nerves. Kittering watched for the extreme flanks of the circling movements to come into his field of view, and on the right 3 punchers appeared, running quickly across Slocum's crude bridge to gain the cover of the trees on the other side of the creek. He showered them with lead, pumping the lever of his gun as fast as he could. The first 2 got across safely, but he caught the last man as he reached the other side, saw him fall, roll into the thick brush that fringed the creek, and then disappear from sight. Immediately, bullets sang from the trees. Slocum's shutters danced and splintered under the drumming smack of the lead. Kittering kept his head down, his gun forward, and a figure appeared briefly on the left flank and then was gone into the trees before Kittering could shoot. In a moment, lead was flying from that sector, but no more appeared. Kittering guessed shrewdly that they were only there to put on a bit of a show of hostility, and that the real attack was to come from the front, where the door and the windows provided vulnerable spots. He called out the surmise to the other defenders, and promptly Doc Martin came back to him. You're a better shot than I am, Jim, the doctor said. You better get up front. I'll just let them know that somebody's here, and if any real trouble starts, I'll holler for help. Kittering yielded his place at the window and paused for a moment by Helen's side. She was so ringed in with heavy logs he could hardly see her, but she smiled at him over the barricade. I'm all right, Jim. Go on. He found Slocum squatting by the window, squinting out under the lower edge of the shutters. Bullets roared across the valley like flights of ducks. The little room bounded to crash and the echo of the shots. Keep him down, boy, Slocum warned. One of them comes through every so often. His rifle went off suddenly and he growled. Missed him. Shoved his head out,
big as life, and I never even come within a foot of 'em."
"Well, there's only 10 now. I got one over on the creek."
"Well, look out for them trees on the left. They're moving up through there."
The firing rapidly increased, and running forms flitted along the trees through the creek. Both men began to shoot, but the darting shapes were difficult marks, and it was doubtful if either scored a hit. And as the smoke cleared, the meadow before the cabin and the fringe of woods along the creek bank looked as quiet and empty as before. All the attackers had found cover.
"How many got in there that time, Jim?"
Slocum asked. "I'd say about 6.
"Well, I don't know what good'll do 'em. They can get up real close in them trees, but they can't shoot into the door or the window. The angle's too wide, and we can see them soon as they expose themselves."
"They're fixin' to run a wiser. Don't you worry. Reckon we'll find it out quick enough." For some time there was quiet. Up the valley the horses of the attackers grazed peacefully, and closer up, where the men were entrenched, nothing stirred. Not even the gleam of a rifle barrel advised of their presence. Doc Martin's side, too, was all quiet. A dim movement flickered in the shadows of the elders, and Slocum fired at it instantly. Although he couldn't exactly see clearly what it was, the next instant something sailed out of the trees and arced through the sky towards the cabin, leaving a trail of smoke behind it. It stuck in the ground a bare 2 feet from the door and remained quivering.
"An arrow!" Slocum exclaimed in astonishment. "Now what the hell? Have they got Injuns out there?"
"No Injuns," Kettering said, "but they're borrowing an Injun trick. They got rags soaked and pitch tied around that arrow. They're fixing to burn us out. You watch for the hombre with a bow." There was a long pause before the next arrow came, and when it did, they never saw the archer. He was laying flat, shooting up in a high arc. But by the same token, his aim was poor, even at as large a mark as the cabin was, and the second and third attempts were no better. One arrow fell short again, and the last went clear over the cabin. It was evident that no Indian was doing such poor shooting, and then Slocum got his chance. In his eagerness, or his annoyance at his bad showing, the man with the bow rose up a little for a better aim, and exposed himself. Homesteader dropped him with a bullet through the forehead.
"9 now,"
he said dispassionately. The firing broke out again, as though in a fury, but soon slackened and died out. And then another burning arrow sailed through the air and stuck at the foot of the wall.
"Well, seems they got another Injun," Slocum remarked. "You see him?"
"Nary hide or hair of him." This time the man with the bow was more careful about exposing himself, and the second and the third arrow curled out of the short just to fall short or go over. But the fourth struck. They heard it thump on the roof, and they heard the faint crackle of burning pitch, and instantly Kettering was at the door, wrestling with the bar. Slocum sprang for him.
"Where you going?"
he shouted. "Cover me," Kettering panted. "I'll blow that arrow out off the roof."
"You're crazy, man. I'll cut you down before you get the door open."
"Slocum, let me go. I gotta knock that air out of there. If the roof catches, we're finished." Savagely, he tore himself loose. And from the next room, Helen cried frantically, "Jim, Jim!" But he never paused. He flung the door open and charged out into the yard. 3 long steps, revolver in hand, he whirled and fired. The arrow, sticking in the crude shingles, flew into splinters, and at the same time came a crash of rifle fire from the men on the trees. Kettering dove headlong in from the door, fell and rolled inside as Slocum slammed the door shut and dropped the bar. The homesteader fell on his knees beside the puncher.
Are you hit, Jim?"
And even as he asked, he saw blood welling through the checkered shirt.
Doc Martin!" he shouted.
Helen cried wildly. Dad, is he hurt? Is Jim hurt?
It's all right, Helen. Don't be scared.
The doctor hurried in.
Take care of him, will you?
Slocum whirled to the window, and nor was he a moment too soon. Men had materialized suddenly out of nowhere and were charging swiftly down upon the cabin. It was as though they knew instantly that Kittering was down and the defense was crippled. Crippled. Grimly Slocum pumped the lever of his rifle. The first man crumpled, running, the second one fell almost on top of him, and a third spun in a half circle and dove head first. The others flung themselves for cover, but a fourth never made it. The frontal attack was over as quickly as it began. With the tremendous violence of his nature, Slocum charged into the back room. The three men at the back had moved in too, and he blasted at them, driving them back into the cover of the trees, and they melted away like mist. Once again, the valley was quiet, deserted except for the trailing blue clouds of gun smoke that drifted down on the breeze. At a scuttling sound behind him, Slocum turned to see Helen struggling to lift herself over her log barricade. "Hey, now!" he exclaimed, jumping down, pushing her back. "What are you trying to do?" "Dad, is he hurt? Tell me."
"I tell you ain't nothing, gal. It's just a scratch or two. I'll go check."
He found the doctor wrapping bandages around Kittering's bared chest.
"Is he hurt bad, Doc?"
he whispered anxiously, with a cautious eye towards Helen's doorway.
"He hit 3 times,"
Doc Martin replied.
"Scalp wound, left side and left shoulder. I don't think they're too dangerous, but they'll cripple him up some."
Kittering opened his eyes and stared up at them.
"Lie still, son."
"I can't lay here," the puncher whispered. "Let me see if I can stand up. It's not bad. We don't want him to think there's only 2 of us left now, do we? Help me up, Doc. I'm not bleeding."
"Now you can't,"
the doctor began, but Kittering made an impatient movement and began trying to get up himself. There was little to do but to help him, and once he stood, swaying a little and standing unsupported, the white bandage around his head gave him a grim, piratical look. "There, I'm all right. I can even shoot. My right arm's still good."
"Jim, you're crazy. You'll kill yourself."
"Hush now, Helen's calling." He stumbled in to reassure her, and Slocum and the doctor exchanged a despairing look. They didn't know what to do. With Kittering down on his back, they were badly handicapped, probably fatally. To let him walk around might kill him, but the puncher's endurance was amazing. As the first shock of his wounds wore off, he actually seemed to gain strength. Although his left arm was useless, he managed to fire his rifle using a log as a rest at his loophole. But the men outside had known that he was hurt, for they began to move with a greater show of confidence. It was only after Slocum's unaired fire and Kittering's slowered shots had picked off another man that they dug themselves in again and resorted to the bow once more. This time, as the burning arrows began to sail out of the trees, Slocum's face was drawn with anxiety. "If they keep that up, Jim, they're going to get 'em to burn us out of here. What'll we do if another one lands?" "You can't see the man with the bow, can you?" "Not even a little bit. He's behind some brush or rocks over there." Another arrow arched up and then dropped close to the wall, and again Slocum fired vainly at the spot from where it had been coming from. He swore helplessly. "He's going to get us sooner or later." The shooting outside had stopped, as though they were concentrated on this duel between the bow and the rifle. If a real archer had been out there, they knew, it would have been long over. The only thing that had saved them so far was the lack of skill with which the arrows were being directed. But even so, they were coming closer and closer, while Slocum burned the air with bullets and swore in a helpless fury. "That," he said, as another shaft struck the wall and split under the impact. "The next one's going to land on the roof, sure as shooting." But the next one never came. For even as they held their breath, waiting for that arching line of flight out from the trees, a shot sounded, clear and loud out in the valley, and they saw a cowboy, clutching a short, dark bow, raise from behind a brush pile and pitch headlong over onto his face. "Harkness!" shouted Kittering. "That's Harkness out there!" There was a sudden commotion in the valley as the cowboys turned to face this new enemy. The slower pace of the siege had been disrupted. Action swift and incisive burst over the valley, and from the cabin they saw cowboys charge up the hillside. The sudden angry bark of revolvers took the place of booming rifles. Slocum saw a grin of fraternal pride on Kittering's face. "They'll have their hands full with that he-wolf," the puncher said. "Look, Jim." Slocum pointed up the valley. Men were coming into sight, racing down the trail. "More punchers from the ranch. Wilding seems to be getting reinforcements." End of chapter 21.